What's up guys, it's Mr. Dingo here, and this time we're trying something different. With a new Forza Motorsport game on the horizon, if you excuse the lame pun, it's worth me telling you what would be a welcome addition to the game. Now, some of these cars could well be throwbacks from previous games, but I may sneak in the odd car that never was, and hopefully it will keep smiles raised. Shout out to you and Tayakaran. Now, I apologise if I butchered the name of the YouTube channel in particular, for inspiring me to come up with this idea. He's come up with various ideas of his own, but I'm hoping that I can satisfy you about as much, or maybe even less, but who knows. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you all in a bit. Meanwhile, onto the video. Yes, I know what you're thinking. No, this isn't a misprint. We may have the Evo 8 MR, but there was actually an Evo 8 non-MR and an FQ330 on the Forza games, the latter only in Motorsport 1 back in 2005. Those Evos came out in 2003 before the Evo 8 MR was even a thing, and I reckon the FQ330 in particular would be a very welcome addition to the Mitsubishi list in a Forza game, with its 0 to 60 time in 4.4 seconds and a top speed of 157. So hopefully they can be added to the game, because let's be real, I think we've seen too much of the Evo 8 MR on its own for quite some time now. Anyways, next! Now, 999 times out of 10, not one Vauxhall in the game isn't a VXR. Vauxhall may have had the Agila in Motorsport 4, the VX220 may have just returned in Horizon 4, and the Lotus Carlton tends to flit from Lotus to Vauxhall and then back to Lotus in games gone by. So, but I thought, how about a 1990s throwback to something like a Calibra Turbo? In my not so humble opinion, the Calibra was one of very few sports cars Vauxhall made using genuine Vauxhall parts, because let's be real, the VX220 is a Lotus Elise with Vauxhall badging, and the Monaro VXR is actually a Holden, which is Australian. So how about adding a Calibra Turbo to the mix, as I feel it would be a very good addition to Vauxhall's parts. Meanwhile, on to the next car. The French hot hatch revolution was at its peak from the late 1980s to the early 2000s, and was one of the best hot hatches to roll off the nation. Was the 106 GTI. Rather than rely on forced induction as today's hot hatches do, this one went into battle with a naturally aspirated 1.6 inline 4, which, although not exactly powerful at 120 brake horsepower, thanks largely to its power to weight ratio, which is actually more than its actual output at 129 brake horsepower per tonne, it can accelerate from 0 to 60 in under 8 seconds, which is actually quicker than almost anything else with the same power output. So, I think I'm right in saying that it would be an excellent addition to the game, at least I think so, because as hot hatches go, it is brilliant. You may remember the original Vanquish that featured in Die Another Day in 2002, which also featured in Motorsport 3 and Motorsport 4. But what I'm talking about is the S, which had a 60 brake horsepower upgrade from the original, from 460 brake horsepower to 520 brake horsepower. It was capable of topping the 200-mile-an-hour barrier quicker than the original, in a quicker time. Not only was the Vanquish S the fastest Aston Martin of the early 2000s, in my opinion, it was also the most beautiful. The original Vanquish stopped featuring in the Forza games from Motorsport 5 and Horizon 1 onwards, so I would really welcome its return along with the S, and I'm sure that a lot of Forza fans do too, or at least I hope they do. Anyways, meanwhile, on to the next car. Now, I know you're thinking, yes, we have an X5, but it's the X5M, and that's not what I'm talking about, even though it is actually in my footage here. What I'm talking about is the 4.8, which bears no resemblance to the X5M in terms of performance. Contrary to the X5M's 4.4 litre twin-turbo V8 with 542 brake horsepower, the 4.8 litre, as the name applies, has a naturally aspirated V8 with 367 brake horsepower and 0.4 of a litre more than the M. So yes, it's slower, but also yes, I would welcome into the upcoming Forza game, if it were possible. Why? Why not? Now, I know there is a two-door Impreza in the game in the form of the extremely rare 22B STI, but stick with me. The version 6 Type R is often seen mainly as a grey import in Japan, and like the 22B, the Type R is also two doors, but it is equally awesome. With a 2 litre flat 4 rather than the 2.2 litre in the 22B, that car can hit 0 to 60 in 5 seconds and top out at 150 miles per hour, maybe more. And I reckon it would be a great addition alongside the 22B and other WRX STIs in the upcoming Forza game. So let's hope it features. Meanwhile, next! The 996 is featured in Forza games as a GT3, which is more like a Carrera 2 with a naturally aspirated flat 6 and a stripped out interior. The 996 Turbo S, which came out a year later, is different. It featured in Need for Speed Most Wanted 2005 as a car you could unlock if you beat Webster on the blacklist on the game, but has never featured in a Forza game. In my opinion, I feel it ought to feature in those games, which is why I added it to my list of cars I would welcome to the Forza games, because not only do you hear the distinctive sounds of the turbochargers, I think it is worthy of beating cars like Ferrari and Aston Martin, maybe more. And yeah, that's all I've really got to say about that. Okay, next! The SL55 AMG is a fine car. It was one of the first AMGs along with the CL, the E, the S and the G-Wagon to kickstart the dark art of supercharging this trademark 5.4 litre M113 V8. The V8 was first capable of horsepower outputs of 469 brake horsepower, and then the power was uprated to 500 brake horsepower in 2003, and then 517 brake horsepower in 2006. The car may have been restricted to 155 miles per hour when it left the showroom in 2002, but take off the restrictor and you'll be reaching 200 miles per hour quicker than you can say AMG. It really is a great car, and I hope it can be an addition to the car list, however it turns up, whether it be a DLC car or it arrives first thing. Anyways, moving on. The Atom is an absurd car, which does feature in the game, but that car is the V8, and I'm talking about the 3.5R supercharged, which comes with a 2-litre inline-4 from a Honda Civic Type R, which you can see in this video's footage here. The 2-litre inline-4, thanks largely to the supercharger, is capable of 350 brake horsepower, and because it weighs as much as a Yorkshire Terrier, it can accelerate from 0 to 60 in 2.8 seconds, and that's quicker than a Ferrari Enzo. I would love for that car to feature in the game, thanks largely to the sound of the supercharger, which sounds the nuts. Anyways, moving on. The C606, which personally is my favourite Corvette, last featured in Motorsport 4 and has since been enjoying a resurgence from Need for Speed Payback to Need for Speed Heat. Since then, it's the more powerful ZR1 that's been taking all the fun, but the 06, for me, fulfills the dictionary definition of a muscle car better with its 7-litre naturally aspirated V8. And as the Americans often say, there's no substitute for cubic inches. Therefore, I would definitely welcome its return to the Forza franchise if they plan it. It really is a great car. And that's all we've got time for this video. Now, there are other cars that I would welcome in the upcoming Forza game, but we'll get to that later. Meanwhile, I hope you enjoyed watching the videos as much as I'm enjoying making it. Like and subscribe to my channel if you are new to my channel. Shout out to Yuan Tayakaram for giving me the inspiration to come up with something like this. And a little side note, by the time this video reaches your computer screens, it will be the 1-year anniversary of my first video. Quite a milestone for me. So yeah, take care, and I'll see you next time. Until then, bye bye.